Marilyn, before we even get into things, we spoke to you maybe 10 days ago, and you gave us your experiences. It was a hard conversation to have. You were saying at one point that, you wake up every day and you check your phone to see if your friends in Gaza are still there or not. I'd just like to kind of throw you the ball and say, I don't want to go, look, give us an update like it's a good thing, but where are you at a couple of weeks later? What do we need to know? What have you learned? Because I have to say, we're not hearing your perspective on any mainstream media outlet at all. We're hearing a lot of, and it's not that you're anti-Israel, right? We're not saying that, but we're hearing lots of purely pro-Israel, to a point of ideologically zealot Israel opinion on mainstream radio, and no sort of centrist or, let's say, looking after the Palestinian perspective. So I'd like to just throw you the ball and say, in the last couple of weeks, is there anything else you want to tell us about, update us on, let us know what's going on from your world at the moment?
I'm stunned at the extent to which our media are simply uncritically rebroadcasting statements that are pre-genocidal. The statements of the military spokesperson of one belligerent, Israel, they go unchallenged, while any information out of Gaza is conditioned with the Hamas-run health system. Both of those steps are just stripping away the civilian protections of Gazans. And what I see as people are streaming out of Gaza City, it's coming to some kind of denouement. Blinken is now talking about after this, the pendulum of permissiveness is swinging back. But the endurance that's been required is beyond belief. The endurance and the abandonment, that's what strikes me. I feel like I need to rethink what I thought I knew of the world that let this happen, continues to let this happen.
Marty, you've been having these conversations recently. We've all been watching the working group and seeing what's going on there. Is there anything you want to specifically share or ask Marilyn while you're here?
I just want to give my support and my solidarity with Marilyn. I think that she is in a space within the debate that is sorely missing and sorely lacking, which is a rational, sober evaluation of the damage the Israeli policy towards Gaza and the West Bank has caused, and who are desperately needed in this debate, because I don't believe there's a military solution in any of this. I don't believe that we are going to see anything other than a warped hatred of Palestinian and Israeli, even more extreme than the current sort of levels that have contributed to where we're at. I just find it extraordinary that Chloe Swarbrick can receive the kind of criticism that she has in the same week that the Israeli Defense Force knocked up 10,000 dead. Now, the Russians have killed 9,000 civilians in the space of almost 2 years of war in the Ukraine, and we are very, very clear that those deaths are considered war crimes. We are very clear about that. We have a very clear line. Yet the Israelis have killed in 1 month. In 1 month, they've killed more than Russia has in 2 years. And the lack of urgency and the lack of determination to stop what's going on is quite. I think Marilyn is right. It's shocking. It's surprising. It's disappointing. It's horrifying. I cannot understand the word humanitarian pause. I don't understand. If you're acknowledging that a war crime is occurring, to pause and then go back to the war crime just seems like an obscenity of reason. So I'm a little shocked and surprised by how extreme it's been, and my fear is that this is just the beginning.
I think part of
would this
You go, Marilyn. You're the guest. Off you go.
That was it. Where else would this happen? In full sight, thoroughly documented. Where else?
What I was going to say, Marty, was you just mentioned there, and I wrote it down, recognition of war crimes. Isn't that the problem? There's no recognition of war crimes. Like, I've just taken to challenging people with one question: do you accept that right now Israel are committing war crimes? And if they say Israel has the right to defend itself, or if they say I don't know, or if they say no, then it's a pointless conversation. You have a propagandist or a zealot. You don't have a conversation. And I'd love to see you ask that question directly to Mr. Grant on your show next time you guys are talking about it, because
I'm sure you'll have some thoughts, but
but it's not even being acknowledged. And one of the things I want to ask both of you, maybe Marty with your media experience and Marilyn with your personal experience, is why do people get on media? And I'm talking about commentators, not like protesters in the street or individuals. And if they're a positive voice for Palestine, they're forced to denounce Hamas before they're even spoken to. Yet if they're a positive voice for Israel, they're not forced to denounce war crimes. They're just let go with whatever they want to say. Why is that? If you've got a thought on that, Marilyn, I'd love to hear you.
I assume that a part of it is our training. You know, the Israeli military spokesperson is well presented. He hasn't been without sleep for a month. His beret is just so. He'll speak in English for us. He knows how to present himself to a Western audience. He's not under stress. And we believe the nice man when he tells us that it's not time for Palestinians to have food and water yet. I think there's a lot of conditioning going
on. To be honest with you, I think it's a feature of us as humans. When we're frightened and we're scared and we see people who we identify with being hurt, it causes an immediate fear. We saw this in the wake of 9/11 with the Islamophobia, the sudden fear of Muslims that was, thrown into our faces. They're all terrorists, they're all this. And I think that what happens is people get scared, they're not sure, all they're knowing is there's a lot of pain and hurt, and they step back. Those of us, of course, who take the time to be educated and try and understand what's going on, it's not as surprising, but it's still pretty appalling. I mean, I wrote at the beginning of this year, and I quoted many mainstream sources, the BBC, the CNN. I wrote in January of this year that all of the ingredients of another intifada had come together now in Israel with the election of this radical Zionist government. And because it's an MMP system of no threshold, you get all sorts of very splinter groups that get representation. And they were so keen to pass new legislation to stop the judiciary from ruling against them illegally taking settlements in the West Bank. They'd enabled, alongside a whole bunch of very, very new, cruel regulations on Palestinian prisoners, that they'd brought together all of the kind of the cocktail now for a terrible rupturing. And I think the West's desire to try and get Israel to sign up as many non-aggression pacts with other Muslim countries in the area forced Hamas into this, sort of backed them into this position where all they had left to do was lash out. Now, I'm in no way, shape, or form justifying their violence on October the 7th. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm not justifying it. But there are reasons why this has happened, and because there has been such a denial to engage with and find political solutions because of the extreme military power the Americans give the Israeli Defense Force. There was sort of I think crept in an arrogance that they didn't really have to deal with the problem. And I think that's come back and backlashed in a terrible, terrible way. And the damage that's being done now, it's just so monstrous. And not only does there need to be an immediate ceasefire and return of the hostages, but there has to be an immediate, I believe, path towards a two-state solution within the next 12 months. I mean, it's gotten to that point now where only sitting down and fighting for peace is the only solution. They cannot seriously go through the entire Gaza Strip and demolish it. And I think that's part of what they're hoping for. But I just don't think civilized people can allow that to occur.
Marilyn, do you want to pick up on what Marty said?
When I lived in Gaza, I wrote later about how hard it was to come to grips with Hamas because they were oppressive and violent and unpleasant from start to finish.
Yeah.
They were unloved, except when they were defending people. And after, it was there for the 2012 and 2014 wars. And after those wars, I would ask my teams in detail, it was hellish for you. How are you feeling about Hamas now? Hamas has bunkers, you don't have bunkers. And they said, almost without exception, after their nightmarish experiences, they said, no one else fights, and the world only sees us in this violence. The moment the violence stops, we're invisible again. So that despair is what brought the present about, and it can't be repeated. There's not enough left to withstand the neglect that the world has gotten by on for these 17 years. This has to be the nadir. It has to be different.
It's fascinating and heart-wrenching that you use the word invisible, Marilyn, when the wars aren't on, because I'm sure you guys have both seen, I think it's Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman from the US, and the point she made was we're not expendable. It's like, so when you're in war, Palestinians seem expendable to the West. Horrible thing to say. I'm not being flippant. This is the word that she used. And then when you're not in war, you're invisible. That sounds like the worst case scenario in both times, Martin.
Yeah. And if you listen to the Hamas spokespeople on Al Jazeera, that they will state, they'll give a list of all of these countries and how many people it took to die before Western colonizers had left the region. And they see those wounds as their only currency. When you're oppressed, when you've got nothing, the thing that your only power is how much pain you can take. And I think for things to have become as deformed as they have to this level, it forces upon us a different way of interacting with each other. And I think where New Zealand can fit into this is, I think, and I've always believed this, we need to have some type of peace academies that we run here in New Zealand where Israeli youth, Palestinian youth are able to come here, they're able to talk, they're able to bond, because this kind of violence and hatred can only happen when you don't know anyone in that world, when you can't see the other as a fellow human being who has the same agencies and the same dreams, the same drives. I think New Zealand, if we believe in peace and if we believe in an idea where we want to see, we want no enemies and we want to see everyone as friends. If we want to live up to that kind of narrative and ideas of how we value ourselves, then I think peace academies where we actually bring these kids and the best teenagers from those communities together in this country, a neutral country, if you will, and they can bond and connect and learn each other, because I think it's going to take the world to step in here. The hatred that has been allowed to fester between these two neighbors, these two furious, beautiful, angry neighbors, has warped into something terrible. I'm certainly not someone who prescribes to an idea of pushing Israel out and the state of Israel must be dismantled or anything like that. It is a historical reality of where we are. They have that homeland. I'm for the Palestinian people and the Israeli people. I think both people deserve peace, and the leaders have failed those people so atrociously that you can understand the bitterness and the anger at the current system. But I think it's going to take the goodwill of everyone else to step in here. But the first thing that has to start for that journey is the ceasefire has to be immediate. We can't have another day where 200 kids are dead.
Yeah. The idea of humanizing people, Bomber, obviously it was a movie, but I've just spent a weekend watching the 7-part series on Gallipoli, fictional, real story based on a true story from 2015. It's on Netflix right now. People want to see it. And the thing that seemed to make the biggest impact between how, the Australians and the Turks thought about each other was they had a ceasefire for a while while they cleared the body, the no man's land of the bodies. And in that, the story is told that the soldiers started talking to each other and swapping cigarettes and doing that kind of stuff. And all of a sudden they saw the enemy as people like them with children and partners, and they were humanized. So however you can do that and humanize the communities to one another, it's surely the only way. Surely, however that happens.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, Marilyn, about the controversy around Chloe Swarbrick and the River to the Sea chant. You're Jewish. We're being told by some quarters that this is an anti-Semitic chant. We've been told by other quarters that it's a chant about kind of an interpersonal freedom. For want of a better word, you are the expert here. You are Jewish. How do you see the River to the Sea chant, and what do you think about the controversy in the media this week?
So it's an uncomfortable chant, but the language of liberation is all about discomfiting people for change. That's not new. The same phrase appears in Article 1 of the first platform of Netanyahu's Likud political party in Israel.
Yeah.
There will be only Jewish sovereignty from the sea to the river. So he got them in the wrong order. So it's been a way of making assertions for a long time. For me, what it symbolizes is the unity of a land and a consciousness that Israel has been trying to fragment for decades. And that is very challenging. But that's not a reason not to be unified. Why is it that a few Jewish institutions can outlaw this phrase when I don't hear concern about the language of this war that would be traumatizing for Palestinians? We seem to believe around here that we have only Jewish sensitivities to look out for. And that's wrong. I mean, imagine being Palestinian and watching and hearing what's happening. If we're going to reach for a language beyond racism, I'm all for it. But if we're simply going to be distracted by the same old Jewish voices saying, you must never say this, you must never say that, you must never make a claim for Palestinian equality and self-determination, I think they just make it a distraction. And we need to look at their legitimacy to do that. I challenge their legitimacy.
Marty, it's funny because on Working Group this week, in fact, we showed a clip last night from it. Brooke Van Velden talked about her electorate being the most populated electorate in New Zealand of Jewish people. And she said, and some of those people are fearing for their lives. And Chewy, who was with me that night, said, what about the Palestinians? And that's kind of what Marilyn's saying. It's like, there's no, I guess I'm being a little bit exaggerative here, but there doesn't seem to be anyone going, there are Palestinians in New Zealand fearful for their lives, fearful of what's going on as well. It is a lot of focus on, the Israelis, the Jewish community, and fine. Look, I'm not suggesting that some of them aren't fearful for their lives or don't consider that poem, that saying, to be threatening. I'm not passing comment on that. I am just suggesting though, and I'd love your response, Marty, why aren't we hearing about the same level, especially from our leaders, our politicians and our commentators, of concern for how Palestinians are feeling in New Zealand at the moment?
Well, I think I think you've got to acknowledge, and I think I'm not being conspiratorial here in any way, shape, or form, but I think you have to acknowledge the starting point when we're discussing this issue is America is our ally, and we stand with our allies, and that's the immediate. So right from the go-get, there is a bias, right, at play in terms of all media, in terms of how the mainstream cover this. And when America is going in to protect its interests as a member of the Five Eyes spy community, as a member who I'm sure are being very active at the moment in this war one way or t'other, when our allies are going to war, there is an establishment position that already starts to move. I mean, the lack of skepticism our media had when we invaded Iraq for weapons of mass destruction is just bewildering, right? You look back on it today and just go, how we were that easily led. So I think there is an establishment opinion that comes forward, and the establishment opinion is we support America. And even when America is doing something atrocious and horrible, like backing Israel to the hilt and allowing this level of just destruction and devastation to occur within a month, I think that we are, when that establishment bias comes in, we look to maintain the narrative, and we don't challenge it much. So it is wall to wall, terrible stories of Israeli settlers who were abused or hurt. It's very rarely, what's actually on the other side of the bombs, or even, Lord, what's going on in the West Bank at the moment with Israeli settlers taking this opportunity to do some terrible, terrible things to Palestinian neighborhoods. And, the danger here, and I suppose the other reason why you have a restraint of narrative is because no one's quite sure where the hell this ends up. The possibility of, and this is, it's terrible to have to put this up as an argument for action when 10,000 dead should just be your immediate, okay, maybe we need to stop and pause here. Yeah. But the other thing that we need to remember is the ease with which this can spiral out of control, that we all have an interest in getting to the peace table as quickly as possible, because the longer this remains out there, the longer there is Gazan deaths and just a rate that just continues to go up exponentially, and as it will when they start the ground offensive proper. The possibility of the West Bank going into complete uprising as well, the possibility of Hezbollah getting involved from the north, the possibility of Iran getting sucked into this, the possibility of Iranian-backed militias in the north of Africa getting involved in this, the potential for Iran, Russia to get America. It's too big. And I think that there has to be a point where cooler minds and cooler heads are able to get in to Netanyahu and pull him back from this brink, because the possibility of this spiraling out of control and becoming a fully fledged regional conflict, it's absolutely there. So we have to get to peace, but people are waiting to see actually how this all pans out. So the establishment position won't change until we start seeing where this goes, I think.
Hey, Marilyn, has it been lovely to have you tonight? You know what I mean. I'm very grateful you came on tonight to talk about such horrific things with us. You're the guest, and you've come on, and you're the expert, more of an expert than any of us in the situation, having been there and know people there. What would you like to leave us with tonight? Any thoughts?
I guess I'd like to leave you with a positive thought about peace camps. And that is that this mess, this onslaught, has been opposed by, among other things, Palestinians and Jews working arm in arm to an unprecedented degree, not only here, but around the world.
Yes.
There's a peace camp in every country you can name, and it consists of Palestinians and Jews and others. And that's a space to build on. Our media may not want to hear these voices, but here we are, that's a space to build some peace on.
Hey, Marilyn, it's been lovely to have you tonight. Bomber, do you want to share anything to finish up that part of the conversation?
I just want to give props to Marilyn and the work that she is doing and the space that she's in. You're absolutely right. The only way we unpick this horror and we start healing it is with the next generation being able to find the friendships and the love and the common humanity that we haven't been able to as adults provide for them. And I just want to give support to your work, and the very, very important way. I believe that's the only, sort of sensible and possible way forward. So all power to your arm.
Thank you very much.
And just so you know, Marilyn, the chat, which I'm terrible with, has been full of kind words towards you, and thank you for being. I'll share you one, which you will probably like. It's from Emma. Emma says, Marilyn, my grandmother gave your book as a present to my father, Gerald Burns, here in Wellington. So there's one from Emma. And if other people want to find out more about the work that Bomber's talking about and that you do, it is ajv.org.nz for the Alternative Jewish Voices of New Zealand. Marilyn, thanks so much for joining us tonight, and I wish you well, and I wish you peace, and we're thinking of you and yours, and I'm sure we'll be in touch with you shortly.
Great. Thank you.
All the best.